There are two main ways of pronouncing ancient Greek. The first is the so-called restored classical pronunciation, which is used in most European high schools and universities. The second is the modern Greek pronunciation, which is used in Greece. In this video, I will argue for the benefits of teaching ancient Greek using the modern Greek pronunciation rather than the restored classical pronunciation. I have a separate video about the differences between these two systems of pronunciation, which I will link to in the description. But first, a bit of history. The foundations for the restored classical pronunciation, also called the Erasmian pronunciation, were laid by Erasmus in 1528 with his treatise De Recta Latini Graecique Sermones Pronunciationis Dialogos. In this work, Erasmus tries to arrive at what Greek would have sounded like in the 5th and 4th centuries BC in Attica. The system used in most schools in America and Europe is very similar to Erasmus's reconstruction. It is very important to note, however, that for Erasmus, this was merely a scholarly exercise, and that he himself used the modern Greek pronunciation. That is to say, the reconstruction of the pronunciation of Attic Greek was merely a philological question for Erasmus, not one of usage. In fact, Erasmus learned Greek in the same way that all Western Europeans learned Greek from the 2nd century BC to the 16th and 17th centuries AD. They found a native speaker of Greek and spoke with them. Having thus learned to speak a modern variation of Greek, they would then begin to read classical Greek extensively, gradually acquiring the differences in syntax, morphology, and grammar. This is made possible by the fact that Greek, due to political, economic, and religious factors, is a very conservative language, and even the most extreme demoticizing versions of modern Greek are very similar to ancient Greek. It is also important to note that the pronunciation of modern Greek is by no means modern, but many of the sound changes that led to modern Greek have their roots in the classical and Hellenistic period, and that all of the sound changes were complete in all varieties of Greek by the 10th and 11th centuries AD at the latest. After Erasmus's work on the subject, there were many scholarly debates in Europe about how Attic Greek would have sounded, but for a long time the issue remained merely a scholarly question. In another video, I will treat the question of when and how the restored system became the most prevalent, but here I will merely say that the German educational system and the introduction of Altertumswissenschaft and the desire to render classics a scientific discipline played a large role. Most linguists today agree that the restored system is largely accurate, and it does indeed have some benefits, especially when reading poetry. However, I am convinced that the benefits of using the modern Greek system of pronunciation far outweigh the scientific accuracy of the restored classical pronunciation. By using the modern Greek pronunciation, we send an important message to students, namely that the Greek language and Greek literature comprise a continuous tradition stretching back from Homer to the modern day. There has never been a period of time where literature of value was not being produced in Greek. Using the Attic system of pronunciation prioritizes an elite dialect of the language and closes off this entire tradition to students, depriving them of the most important research for learning ancient Greek, namely the connection to modern Greek. I have another video treating this subject to which I will link in the description, but in short, modern Greek is by far the most accessible version of Greek, and connecting ancient Greek to the modern Greek language, culture, and people only enhances and deepens students' knowledge. It is indeed possible to learn ancient Greek without reference to the modern language, but fluent speakers of modern Greek have a huge advantage when learning to read ancient Greek, and it is my experience that learning modern Greek directly correlates to increased reading fluency in ancient Greek. In addition to promoting the Greek language as a continuous tradition, the use of the modern Greek pronunciation also connects students to the scholars and writers of both the Roman period and of the Renaissance, who all learned Greek by reference to the living spoken language. Finally, it should be noted that the modern Greek pronunciation is the only pronunciation of Greek for which we have verifiable evidence in the form of recordings. It is important to remember that the restored classical pronunciation is an artificial philological reconstruction and therefore was likely never used in this exact form by any one speaker. Greek is a tradition that spans many centuries and many different dialects, and language changes very quickly. Therefore, it makes no sense to pronounce Homeric, Attic, Ionic, Aeolic, Koine, and Byzantine Greek with the same restored classical pronunciation. Ironically enough, it is likely more anachronistic to use Attic Greek pronunciation while reading Homer, Aristotle, and Koine than it is to use the modern Greek pronunciation for everything. In short, restored classical pronunciation obscures the connections between the various stages of Greek, while modern Greek pronunciation highlights the remarkable continuity and resilience of the Greek language and puts students of classical Greek in close connection with the living, breathing Greek language and nation.